overcome by vinegar. That if you have a towel, you drop the towel, you use the vinegar, then you protect your eyes, you can actually stay there for 24 hours without hurting your eyes. Like, wow. So then I saw a manual of 5 pages on how to resist police, or how to make a blockade in the plaza, and how to protect your tent, and actually information that reminded me of military instructions. And this is the kind of information that was flowing in Arab and in English. And another good anecdote, very emotional anecdote from social media, is the crowdsourcing. Crowdsourcing means that, you know, when you are in the chip, you have your mind in the NGO world. And by NGO, I mean that you need money for it. In social media, you have to pay for stuff. In social media, what actually you get is that you can ask your network for free. I need a translation. I have these instructions. I need to translate this from Arab to English and to French, or to whatever I need. I just propose the problem in the network. And somebody will have an answer, whether it's somebody from an NGO or a former activist or somebody in the middle of the plaza that says, hey, I'm here. What do you need? That happened. This interconnection that was actually worldwide, simultaneous, was like the exclusive ways of communication in some moments when actually media and traditional media was absent.
Right. Well, my background, I'm on the technology side of the world generally rather than, say, the policy side. And so one of my questions is always, well, how could tools be better? And so what is sort of missing there? And you were talking about translation. I think, gosh, isn't that a problem we should have solved by
Definitely.
now? So my question to, and let me just sort of open it up to the full panel here, is sort of what tools could be better, or what tools are missing, or what tools are going to be needed now as we're changing
There are actually 2 urgent requests. One, one is for Facebook and Twitter, because this is where the information flows the most. Finally, YouTube is video, and video is universal. Actually, it's the responsibility of the publisher of a video to make like subtitles or different versions in languages. But the text version of social media, which is Twitter and Facebook, actually can do a better job by implementing translation inside the platforms. For example, I am a huge fan of Google Translation, but I have to go to a third party to have the translation of a tweet and use the copy paste. It's annoying. So you could integrate that. Second, you know, with Robert Guerra from the Freedom House and several other actually activists from different causes from Venezuela, we've been actually opening the debate about how important it is for you, and for you mean the owners of the platforms, to realize that we need more protection when it comes to safety, so when it comes to threats, or when it comes to the shutdown of our accounts. You know that in this era of spam, it's very easy for a Facebook robot to shut your account because you're sending too many messages in a short period of time. So we would like, the ideal scenario would be to have a department for foreign affairs or for citizens affairs, where you can actually administer one by one those cases. Because there are sometimes, for example, Rodrigo in Caracas was in the middle of the protest, his account was closed, and there's nothing he could do. There's no call he could make to Palo Alto, or no department he could contact. So that's the kind of things that you guys up there in Palo Alto need to be aware of. And I won't say more.
I asked the question, it's only fair.
And building on that, I mean, I think that there are kind of 2 sets, and one, I think Oscar does a very good job of, you know, those tools, as we were mentioning, thinking about how these tools are being used in these environments. How do you really need to rethink the way that you deploy these existing services? And so, you know, one little example of that is Facebook's anonymity policy, which makes a lot of sense in certain contexts. But whenever you're operating in a place where having your real name associated with actions you're taking online puts you at risk, it really can result in a chilling effect on people's willingness to use those sorts of tools. And so rethinking what are maybe better alternative approaches to achieving some of the things that they were hoping to accomplish by not allowing anonymous accounts. And so one other broad area of where do we need the tools, I think the social media tools that are out there have shown the the role that they can play in that mass movement side of things, and in particular, the value they add in not just coordinating and providing information about mass movement, but also creating that sense of solidarity that we're all in it together and we're all going to be out there in the square the next day. And for that, they're particularly powerful. What I think what remains to be seen are the tools that will be needed going forward to actually have meaningful involvement in deliberation and policy, to actually engage people in meaningful ways in the day-to-day job of governance, beyond just getting people out into the streets. There are interesting examples out there, but I think we're just scratching the surface of what's needed in order to be able to do that in effective ways and scale it to the size that you need for democracy to work.
Go ahead.
Just one, since you asked the question, I'm going to bring this home to Google. So basically, when we search these days on Google, if we search for a term, whether it's jihad, Islam, or Pakistan, say, for example, I think Google basically brings up the most popular results first. So if you think about a scenario where the most popular search terms these days are for the negative connotations of these words rather than the positive connotations, and if you think about the effect that has on promoting further the propaganda of the extremists, because if you've got a young, angry, 16-year-old Muslim sitting in Pakistan searching for the true meaning of jihad, and he writes jihad, and he gets bin Laden's face up on there telling him that he's got to go and blow himself up, then there's something going wrong, because the most popular doesn't necessarily mean correct, as we know from the lessons learned from Hitler's election. So I think perhaps there's a way of looking at, Google already promotes certain charities. I know, for example, it may promote in search results a certain result or a charity, and it says promoted next to it. I don't know if Google does that, but others do. Is there a way of looking into promoting, considering positive ideas as a charity, and promoting those results so that when this young 16-year-old types in jihad, he gets, rather than bin Laden's face come up first, which inevitably is going to be the most popular one, he gets somebody else coming up actually as presenting a positive alternative to that message, and then down below somewhere is bin Laden's face. So at least he's been exposed to the positive message first, and that's something perhaps for Google to consider. It may be tinkering with the results, but of course you probably have less people blown up if you do so.
It's a very good point. Unfortunately, we can't tinker with the search
I don't
results.
need to put you on the
No, I'm not the search expert, so luckily I can talk with complete immunity because I don't represent the search team. We cannot actually ever tinker with the results. So promoted results are never as a result of Google doing any manipulation on our end. But I think one of the solutions is to have more good, positive content out there. And I think that's the big thing that a lot of these tools really do allow, is to get more content out there. But I do think creating new, better tools, better content, better ways of publishing tools is a huge goal of ours.
Yeah, and I think that, again, part of keeping the success of the internet and the services that have been most successful are those that have been basically free and open, that haven't been directed in a particular way. And while I certainly am sympathetic to the argument that you're making and the benefit that would come from that, I think you also need to be careful about manipulating it too much in that people go to those places where they think they're going to get the open answers, where they're not being manipulated, where they're not being preached to. And I think that again, the internet overall, it would be concerning if you had a situation where, even for good reasons, somebody deciding what you should and shouldn't read. And those are exactly the sorts of things that we're fighting against in many of the countries that we're operating in, is that belief that there's some higher power within a country who should decide what should be accessible and what shouldn't be accessible.
Well, you already have a policy where you take down videos that promote violence and break the law. So that's what I'm arguing for in Google results rather than on YouTube. YouTube, you can complain about bin Laden videos, and if they are inciting violence and terrorism and killing of innocents, they tend to take the videos down. So what I'm saying is extend that policy to Google results.
Minnie, I have when it comes to search engines, it's very important. Now that you mentioned, actually, I was not aware, but it's a good topic to discuss. How can we make this information on spreading in a better way information about a cause, information about a regime, denouncing actually, for example, in South America that we have now like an increasing level of oppression, specifically in Venezuela. Our goal here from the States is to provide a bridge, not only to translate information into as many other languages so the world can know, but to make a better spreading job. And this is when Google comes handy, because if I am a webmaster of a website that promotes freedom or promotes a cause, I have to pay money for a company that will help me make my website more efficient for your Google Spider. What if you gave me that information for free, if you really believe in my cause? Things like that actually can be done over the next years.
Yeah. Should we take questions from the audience as well? Great. Okay, I've got a few questions here. How about we start with, in the green in the front?
Thank you. Sure. Ramin Ahmadi, one of the founders of Iran Human Rights Documentation Center. You know, our Iranian Green Revolution was very savvy in terms of using the internet, and the regime was also, I think, very savvy in trying to control this particular mode of communication compared to many other regimes in the Middle East. I think you're dealing with a regime that is also technically savvy. And so we have reached a point where once those channels, those communication channels, were being contained and controlled very well, particularly in terms of manipulation of internet by the Iranian regime, our activists were paralyzed because they were very much used to using essentially social networks and the internet to communicate. So I found myself at some point telling our activists, trying to wean them off the internet, saying, you know, we did have revolution before we had an internet, you know, and we do need to try to strengthen a lot of other networks, the neighborhood networks, the you know, handshakes and talks and communications between families and so forth. But having said all of that, and having that we have had to do a lot in order to rebuild those more traditional networks and to sort of, to some extent, make the young people less, you know, to rely less on the internet. I wanted to, and this is a very internet-savvy panel here, I wanted to have your thoughts on what are some of the ways, when you're dealing with these internet-savvy regimes, what are some of the ways we could undermine them and their control of the internet? What is a way that we could, for instance, in Iran, make available the internet to our activists and to weaken the control of the regime on the internet? Because that is one of our fundamental problems at the moment, and I believe that is a problem that if it is resolved quickly, the Green Revolution could be a lot more successful, a lot quicker. Thank you, and sorry for the long question.
So one thing I will say is every now and then I talk to folks about, do you know how to set up a proxy server? Do you know how to use VPN? And the Iranians always do. It's consistently, they are, because they have been combating this issue. Ian, you might want to speak, and then Paul.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think there are a number of areas where we can begin to work on that. One is the development of tools, and both circumvention tools in order to get around blocks on access to information. But it's not just about accessing information, it's about doing it in a safe way. So circumvention tools and also digital safety tools that allow people to anonymize their traffic, to you know, the sorts of things that some of the things have been reported on lately, you know, that it's not just about online, it's also about mobile. And so the panic button is a way for people to be able to quickly alert their network that they are being harassed. Those are the sorts of things that we've invested in. Beyond the tools, though, knowledge is a huge part of it. And while you're right that in Iran, where they've been dealing with this quite a bit longer, some of the more tech-savvy people are aware of that. But a lot of times people don't understand what are the risks of different technologies they're using or different services that they're using. And so getting that information out there about what are the options that are available. Right now, globally, about around 3% of people are taking advantage of circumvention tools that exist. There are a lot of other sorts of things that can be done in order to expand that. And then beyond the knowledge and the technologies, advocacy and policy, those sort of work, and again,